Victoria Chen glanced at the dashboard clock as she merged onto the highway. 9:45. Later than she'd planned to leave her mother's house, but the evening had been worth it. Her mom was doing better after the surgery. Finally getting her strength back and seeing her smile again made the 2-hour drive worthwhile. The roads were quiet this time of night. Just a few scattered cars, their taillights glowing red in the distance. Victoria kept her speed steady, cruise control set exactly at the limit. After 20 years in law enforcement, following traffic laws had become second nature. She didn't speed, didn't roll through stops, always used her turn signal. It wasn't just about being a good citizen. It was about not giving anyone a reason to pull her over. She'd learned that lesson early in her career. The GPS guided her off the highway and onto the local roads that would take her home. Tree-lined streets, modest houses with porch lights glowing. This was the kind of neighborhood where people knew their neighbors, where kids still played outside until the streetlights came on. Victoria approached the intersection of Maple and Oak, saw the stop sign ahead and pressed the brake. The car came to a complete stop. She counted in her head, 1, 2, 3, an old habit from driver's education that had stuck with her. Then she checked both ways and proceeded through the intersection. That's when she saw the flash of red and blue lights in her rearview mirror. Her stomach tightened. She hadn't been speeding. She'd stopped at the sign. What could this possibly be about? Victoria flipped on her turn signal and pulled over to the curb, her movements calm and deliberate despite the adrenaline starting to pump through her system. She put the car in park, turned on the interior light, and placed both hands on the steering wheel where they'd be clearly visible. These weren't the actions of someone nervous about getting caught doing something wrong. These were the actions of someone who'd been trained extensively on how to survive interactions with law enforcement. Someone who'd sat through countless seminars on officer safety and understood exactly what made cops nervous during traffic stops. In her rearview mirror, she watched the patrol car pull in behind her. A single officer emerged, adjusting his duty belt as he walked toward her vehicle with that particular swagger some cops developed after years on the job. He was maybe in his late 30s, physically fit, and moving with the confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Victoria kept her hands on the wheel and waited. The officer reached her window and immediately shone his flashlight directly into her face. She resisted the urge to squint or look away. "Good evening, officer," she said, her voice calm and respectful. "What seems to be the problem?" "License and registration," he said, not answering her question. "You ran that stop sign back at Maple and Oak." Victoria's mind immediately replayed the intersection. She'd stopped. She was certain of it. She'd counted to 3, checked both directions, then proceeded. There was no way she'd run that sign. "I'm quite sure I came to a complete stop, officer," she said, keeping her tone measured and polite. The flashlight beam moved from her face to sweep across the interior of her car. "Are you arguing with me?" His voice had an edge to it now. "No, sir. I'm simply stating what I know to be true. I stopped at that intersection. License and registration, now." The command was sharp, leaving no room for discussion. Victoria had a decision to make in that moment. She could identify herself as an FBI agent right now, flash her credentials, maybe diffuse the situation by establishing that she was law enforcement too. It was a tactic some agents used during traffic stops, a professional courtesy that often resulted in a warning instead of a ticket. But Victoria had never liked using her badge that way. It felt like an abuse of position, like she was asking for special treatment just because she carried federal credentials. More than that, she'd seen too many situations where announcing you were FBI to a local cop made things worse, not better. Some officers took it as a challenge, saw it as federal agents thinking they were above the law, so she made the choice to handle this like any other citizen would. "I'm reaching into my glove compartment to get my registration," she announced clearly, moving her right hand slowly toward the glove box. "My wallet with my license is in my purse on the passenger seat." She noticed the officer's hand drift toward his weapon as she moved. It was subtle, probably reflexive, but it told her everything she needed to know about his mindset. He was on edge, ready to perceive threat in her movements. Victoria retrieved her registration and insurance card, then slowly reached for her purse. She pulled out her wallet and extracted her driver's license, handing all 3 documents to the officer. He took them without a word and walked back to his patrol car. Victoria sat in the quiet darkness of her car, hands back on the steering wheel, and thought about what was happening. She hadn't run that stop sign. She was absolutely certain, which meant this officer was either mistaken or lying. And if he was lying, the question was why. In her 20 years with the FBI, Victoria had investigated plenty of corrupt cops. Officers who planted evidence, falsified reports, violated civil rights. She'd seen how power could corrupt, how the authority of a badge and gun could turn some people into exactly the kind of criminals they were supposed to be catching. But she'd also worked with thousands of good, honest officers who did their jobs with integrity, people who put their lives on the line every day to protect their communities, people who deserved respect and support. So which kind was this officer walking back toward her car right now? He returned with a citation book in hand. That answered one question. He wasn't planning to give her a warning. "You're getting a ticket for running a stop sign," he said, already writing. "That's $250 and 2 points on your license." "Officer," Victoria kept her voice calm. "With all due respect, I did not run that stop sign. I came to a complete stop, counted to 3, checked both directions, and then proceeded through the intersection." The officer stopped writing and looked at her. Really looked at her for the first time. His expression hardened. "Are you calling me a liar? I'm saying there may be a misunderstanding. Do you have dash cam footage of the stop? We could review it together and clear this up." Something flickered across the officer's face. It was fast, barely noticeable. But Victoria had spent years interrogating suspects and witnesses. She'd learned to read micro-expressions, those tiny flashes of emotion that people couldn't quite control. What she saw in that moment looked like concern, maybe even guilt. "The dash cam wasn't working tonight," he said, his voice flat. "Equipment malfunction. But I know what I saw, and I saw you roll through that stop sign without stopping." "Wasn't working," Victoria repeated, keeping her tone neutral. "That's unfortunate. Yeah, well, equipment fails sometimes, but I don't need a camera to tell me what I witnessed with my own eyes. And I'm writing you this citation. You can contest it in court if you want, but I'll tell you right now, the judge always believes the officer." There it was, the confidence of someone who'd played this game before and won, the assumption that his word would be taken as gospel, that hers would be dismissed. The officer finished writing the ticket and handed it to her along with her license and registration. "Sign here. This isn't an admission of guilt, just confirmation that you received the citation." Victoria signed, her mind already working through her options. She could contest this in court, which meant taking time off work, hiring a lawyer, going through the whole process. Most people would just pay the fine, take the points, and move on with their lives. But Victoria wasn't most people. "I will be contesting this citation," she said as she took her copy of the ticket. The officer smirked. Actually smirked. "Suit yourself. I'll see you in court, Ms. Chen. I've testified in traffic court probably 300 times, never lost a case yet." He said it like it was a point of pride, like his perfect record was evidence of his accuracy, rather than possibly something else entirely. "I look forward to it," Victoria said. The officer walked back to his patrol car, and Victoria sat there for a moment, looking at the citation in her hand. "Officer Ryan Mitchell, badge number 2847. Date and time of the alleged violation. Location, the works." She pulled out her phone and made a note of everything while it was fresh in her mind. The exact time he pulled her over. His behavior during the stop. His statement about the dashcam malfunction. His comment about never losing a case in traffic court. Then she did something the officer couldn't have anticipated. She checked her own dashcam footage. Victoria had installed a dashcam in her vehicle 3 years ago after working a case involving staged accidents and insurance fraud. It was a good camera, high definition with a wide-angle view that captured everything in front of her vehicle, and it had been recording the entire time. She pulled up the footage on her phone, scrolled back to the intersection, and watched. There she was, approaching the stop sign. Brake lights coming on, the car coming to a complete stop. She could even see herself checking both directions before proceeding. Crystal clear, undeniable. She had not run that stop sign, which meant Officer Ryan Mitchell had just lied. Not made a mistake, not misjudged the situation, lied. Victoria sat in her car, the citation in one hand and her phone in the other, and made a decision. She wasn't going to just pay this fine and let it go. She was going to fight it. And more than that, She was going to find out if this was a one-time thing or if Officer Mitchell had a pattern of this behavior. Because if he'd lied to her, how many other people had he lied about? How many had simply paid their fines because they didn't have video evidence? How many had been too intimidated or too busy or too poor to fight back? Victoria started her car and pulled back onto the road, driving carefully home. She had a lot of work to do. Phone calls to make, records to request, a case to build. Officer Mitchell thought he'd see her in court, and he was right about that. But he had no idea who he was dealing with. He'd just lied to an assistant special agent in charge of the FBI. Someone who investigated corruption for a living. Someone who had resources and knowledge and, most importantly, evidence. This was going to be interesting. Victoria didn't sleep well that night. Not because she was worried about the ticket. She had clear evidence of her innocence. But because her mind was racing with questions about Officer Mitchell and his convenient equipment malfunction. The next morning, she arrived at her office early. The FBI field office was quiet at 6:30 in the morning, just a few agents at their desks, nursing coffee and reviewing case files. Victoria had always been an early riser, and some of her best work happened in these quiet hours before the phone started ringing. She logged into her computer and pulled up the citation. Then she did what she did best. She started investigating. Her first step was a public records request. Every state had sunshine laws that gave citizens access to certain government documents. Victoria filed a formal request with the local police department for Officer Mitchell's dashcam footage from the night of her traffic stop. Even if the camera had malfunctioned, there should be a record of that malfunction, maintenance log, something. She also requested Mitchell's citation records for the past 12 months. How many tickets had he issued? How many had been contested? What were the outcomes? Then she did something that felt a bit like using a nuclear weapon to kill a mosquito. But her instincts were telling her this was bigger than just one bad ticket. She ran Officer Ryan Mitchell through the FBI's databases. No criminal record, no federal charges, no red flags that would show up in a standard background check. But Victoria had access to more than standard databases. She could see if Mitchell's name had ever come up in any federal investigations, even tangentially. And there it was. Nothing concrete, but his name appeared in a civil rights complaint from 2 years ago. The complaint had been filed by a citizen alleging false arrest and excessive force. It had been investigated by the local police department's Internal Affairs Division and cleared. Mitchell had been found to have acted appropriately. Victoria made a note. One complaint didn't mean much. Good cops got complaints sometimes from people who were angry about being arrested. But it was a data point. Her phone rang. It was her colleague, Agent Tony Reeves, from the Public Corruption Task Force she supervised. "You're in early," Tony said. "Everything okay?" "Got pulled over last night," Victoria said. "Bogus ticket. Officer claimed I ran a stop sign. Did you?" "No, and I have dashcam footage proving it." There was a pause. "So you're going to fight it?" "I'm going to fight it. But Tony, something feels off about this whole thing." The officer claimed his dashcam malfunctioned. Said he never loses cases in traffic court. She could almost hear Tony's mind working through the phone. He'd been investigating corruption cases for 15 years. He knew the patterns. "You think he's done this before?" Tony said. "It wasn't a question. I think it's worth looking into. Can you do me a favor? Pull any complaints or lawsuits filed against Officer Ryan Mitchell with the Riverside Police Department. Federal, state, local, anything you can find." "You got it. When's your court date?" Victoria looked at the citation. 6 weeks from now. "Plenty of time to build a case," Tony said. "If there's something there, we'll find it." Over the next 2 weeks, information started trickling in. The public records request came back first. Officer Mitchell had issued over 200 citations in the past year, an unusually high number compared to other officers in his department. That alone wasn't necessarily suspicious. Some cops were just more proactive about traffic enforcement. But then Victoria saw the pattern. Of those 200 citations, 47 had been contested in court. And of those 47, 15 had involved dashcam footage that was supposedly unavailable due to equipment malfunction. 15 times in 1 year, Mitchell's dashcam had failed during a traffic stop that was later contested. Victoria pulled the court records for those 15 cases. Every single one, Officer Mitchell had testified that he witnessed the violation. Every single one, the defendant had claimed they didn't commit the violation. And every single one, the judge had ruled in Mitchell's favor. It was the perfect scam. Without video evidence, it became his word against the drivers, and judges almost always sided with the officer. Tony's research turned up more concerning information. 3 civil complaints had been filed against Mitchell in the past 5 years. All 3 had been investigated internally and cleared. One involved allegations of false testimony in a DUI case. Another involved claims of an unlawful search. The third was the excessive force complaint Victoria had already found. "This guy's dirty," Tony said when he came into Victoria's office with his findings. "I can feel it. But the question is how dirty and how do we prove it?" "We prove it in court," Victoria said. "When I contest this citation, I'm going to bring my dashcam footage. I'm going to show that he lied under oath, and then we're going to use that to open a broader investigation into his conduct." "You know he's going to double down," Tony warned. "Cops don't like being called liars, especially in court. He might claim your footage is doctored, that the timestamp is wrong, something." "Let him try," Victoria said. "I've got the original file with metadata. I've got GPS coordinates embedded in the video. I've got everything we need to prove authenticity." What Victoria didn't tell Tony was that she'd spent the past 2 weeks reaching out to some of the people who'd contested Mitchell's citations and lost. It hadn't been easy to find them. Court records only gave names and case numbers, not contact information. But Victoria was resourceful. She'd tracked down 8 of the 15 people who'd been cited during supposed dashcam malfunctions. And their stories were remarkably similar to hers. A woman named Patricia Gomez told Victoria she'd been cited for running a red light she swore she hadn't run. "The officer said his camera wasn't working," Patricia explained. "I wanted to fight it, but I couldn't afford to miss work for court. And my friend who went through something similar said the judges always believe the cops anyway, so I just paid it." A college student named Kevin Thompson had been cited for an illegal lane change he insisted he hadn't made. "I know I used my turn signal. I'm super careful because I can't afford insurance increases. But the cop said I didn't signal, and he said his dashcam wasn't recording. I showed up to court, told my side, and the judge didn't even seem to listen. He just ruled for the officer." Story after story, all following the same pattern. Mitchell would claim a violation, claim his dashcam wasn't working, and win in court based on his testimony alone. The most heartbreaking story came from an elderly man named Walter Phillips. He'd been cited for speeding, supposedly going 50 in a 35 zone. "I have a pacemaker," Walter told Victoria. "I don't drive fast anymore. It scares me." But the officer insisted I was speeding, and without his camera footage, I couldn't prove otherwise. "That ticket cost me $300. I'm on a fixed income. That was my grocery money for a month." Victoria listened to each story with growing anger. This wasn't just about her ticket anymore. This was about a police officer who was systematically lying and profiting from those lies. Because every citation brought in revenue for the city. Every citation made Mitchell look productive to his superiors. She started building a case file documenting everything. The pattern of equipment malfunctions, the testimonies from citizens who'd been cited, the court records showing Mitchell's perfect win rate, and then she got a break she hadn't expected. One of the people she'd contacted, a man named Daniel Rivera, who'd been cited for an illegal U-turn, mentioned something interesting. "After I paid the ticket, I saw that cop a few weeks later pulling over another car in the same spot. Same intersection. Made me wonder if he just camps out there looking for people to ticket." Victoria pulled Mitchell's citation records and looked at the locations. Sure enough, certain intersections appeared over and over. He was targeting specific spots, places where he could claim violations that would be hard to disprove without video evidence. The intersection where he'd pulled Victoria over appeared 6 times in his citation records from the past year. All 6 stops had resulted in tickets for running the stop sign. 4 of those tickets had been contested. 3 of those 4 had involved dashcam malfunctions. It was a pattern that would be hard to explain away as coincidence. Victoria prepared her case meticulously. She organized her evidence, prepared her arguments, and made copies of everything. Her dashcam footage was backed up in 3 different locations. The metadata was preserved. The GPS coordinates were verified. She also did something else. She reached out to some of the people Mitchell had cited and asked if they'd be willing to come to court as observers when she contested her ticket. Not to testify, they didn't need to do that. But just to be there, to show that this wasn't just about one ticket, that there was a pattern of behavior that needed to be addressed. 5 of them agreed to come. As the court date approached, Victoria found herself thinking about why she was doing this. Yes, she was angry about the false ticket. Yes, she wanted to clear her driving record. But it was more than that. She thought about Walter Phillips eating ramen noodles because a crooked cop had taken his grocery money. She thought about Patricia Gomez, too afraid of the system to even fight back. She thought about all the people who'd been victimized by someone who was supposed to protect them. That's what bothered her most. Mitchell had taken an oath to serve and protect. He'd been given authority and trust by his community. And he'd betrayed that trust for what? Citation quotas? The power trip of knowing he could lie and get away with it? Victoria had spent her entire career going after people who abused power. Mobsters who thought they were above the law. Politicians who used their positions for personal gain. Cops who violated the civil rights of the citizens they were supposed to serve. Officer Mitchell was just another in a long line of people who thought their position made them untouchable. He was about to learn otherwise. The night before her court date, Victoria reviewed her preparation one last time. She had her evidence organized in a folder. She had her dash cam footage loaded on her laptop and backed up on a thumb drive. She had her talking points outlined. She also had her FBI credentials in her jacket pocket, though she hadn't yet decided when, or if, she'd reveal her identity. Part of her wanted to let the evidence speak for itself, to prove her case just like any other citizen would have to. But another part of her knew that her position gave her a credibility that might help convince the judge to look deeper into Mitchell's pattern of behavior. She'd decide in the moment. Victoria set her alarm for 6 a.m. Court was at 9 and she wanted to be early. She wanted to see Mitchell arrive, to watch his face when he saw her sitting there ready to fight. Because Officer Ryan Mitchell thought he was walking into just another routine traffic case. Another defendant he could steamroll with his confident testimony and his clean uniform and his badge. What he didn't know was that Victoria Chen had spent 20 years taking down people who thought they were untouchable. She'd gone up against organized crime bosses, corrupt politicians, and dirty cops who were a lot smarter and more dangerous than him. This was going to be easy, almost too easy, but satisfying. Very, very satisfying. The courthouse was one of those old municipal buildings that had seen better days. Worn marble floors, fluorescent lights that hummed slightly, and wooden benches that creaked whenever someone shifted their weight. Victoria arrived at 8:15, giving herself plenty of time before the 9 o'clock docket began. She'd dressed carefully that morning, professional but not flashy. Dark slacks, a blazer, sensible shoes. Nothing that would draw attention, or suggest she was anything other than a regular citizen contesting a traffic ticket. Her FBI credentials were in her jacket pocket, but she'd left her service weapon locked in the car. No need to complicate things. The courtroom was already starting to fill up. Traffic court was always busy, filled with people who'd been caught. Speeding, running red lights, or in Victoria's case, allegedly running stop signs. Most people showed up alone, nervously clutching their citations. A few had lawyers. Almost no one looked happy to be there. Victoria took a seat in the middle of the courtroom where she'd have a good view of everything. She opened the folder she'd brought and reviewed her notes one more time, even though she'd memorized every detail. At 8:40, she saw Officer Mitchell walk in. He looked exactly as she remembered, confident, comfortable, completely at ease. He was in full uniform, his badge polished, his shoes shined. He nodded to the bailiff like they were old friends, then took his seat at the front of the courtroom where the officers typically sat. He didn't even glance at the audience. Why would he? He'd probably testified in this courtroom dozens of times. This was routine for him. Victoria watched him, studying his body language. No nervousness, no hesitation. He sat there looking at his phone, occasionally laughing at something on his screen, completely relaxed. At 8:50, 5 people entered the courtroom together and sat in the row behind Victoria. She recognized them immediately, the citizens she'd reached out to who'd agreed to come observe. Patricia Gomez, who'd paid a ticket rather than fight. Kevin Thompson, the college student who'd lost his case. Walter Phillips, the elderly man who'd lost his grocery money. Daniel Rivera, who'd noticed Mitchell's pattern of targeting the same intersections, and a woman named Jennifer Wu who'd been sighted during a dashcam malfunction and had always wondered if she'd been set up. They'd all taken time off work to be here, not to testify but to witness, to see if Victoria could do what they hadn't been able to do, prove that Officer Mitchell was lying. At 9 o'clock sharp, everyone stood as Judge Howard Bennett entered the courtroom. He was in his late 50s, gray-haired with the tired expression of someone who'd been doing this job for too long. He settled into his chair, adjusted his glasses, and picked up the first file. "Court is now in session," the bailiff announced. What followed was a depressing parade of cases. One after another, citizens stood before the judge to contest their tickets. And one after another, the judge ruled in favor of the citing officers. A woman insisted she'd been going the speed limit when she was cited for speeding. The officer said his radar gun clocked her at 15 over. The judge believed the officer. Guilty. A man claimed he'd stopped at a red light before turning right. The officer said he'd rolled through. The judge believed the officer. Guilty. It went on like that for almost an hour. Victoria counted 12 cases before hers was called. The officers won 11 of them. The only case the citizen won was when the citing officer failed to show up to court, and the judge had no choice but to dismiss. The message was clear. Without overwhelming evidence to the contrary, the judge was going to side with the officer every time. Finally, the bailiff called out, "Case number 472923, People versus Victoria Chen, failure to stop at a stop sign." Victoria gathered her folder and laptop and approached the defendant's table. Officer Mitchell stood and walked to the other side, and for the first time that morning, he actually looked at her. There was a flicker of recognition. He remembered her from the traffic stop, but his expression didn't change. He still looked completely confident. Judge Bennett glanced at the file. "Ms. Chen, you're contesting a citation for running a stop sign?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Officer Mitchell, please describe what you witnessed." Mitchell stood a bit straighter, his voice clear and professional. "Yes, Your Honor. On the evening of September 15th at approximately 9:47 p.m., I was on routine patrol in the area of Maple and Oak Streets. I observed the defendant's vehicle, a blue Honda Accord, approaching the intersection from the north. There is a clearly posted stop sign at that intersection. The defendant's vehicle failed to come to a complete stop and proceeded through the intersection. He said it with such conviction, such certainty. If Victoria hadn't known better, even she might have believed him. "I initiated a traffic stop and issued a citation for the violation," Mitchell continued. "The intersection is in a residential area with children present during daytime hours, and stop sign violations pose a significant safety risk." Nice touch, Victoria thought. Mention children and safety. Make it sound like he's protecting the community. "And you're certain the defendant didn't stop?" Judge Bennett asked. "Absolutely certain, Your Honor. I had a clear, unobstructed view of the intersection. The vehicle rolled through without stopping. Did you have dashcam footage of this incident?" "Here it comes," Victoria thought. "Unfortunately not, Your Honor," Mitchell said, and he actually managed to look regretful. "My dashcam experienced a technical malfunction that evening. It's been sent to the department's IT division for repair. But I don't need camera footage to testify to what I witnessed with my own eyes." Judge Bennett nodded like he'd heard this explanation before and found it perfectly reasonable. "Ms. Chen, do you have anything to say?" Victoria stood. "Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to respectfully state that I did come to a complete stop at that intersection. I stopped, counted to 3, checked both directions for traffic, and then proceeded." "Do you have any evidence to support this?" the judge asked, and his tone suggested he already knew the answer would be no. "I do, Your Honor. I'd like to enter into evidence dashcam footage from my own vehicle that clearly shows I came to a complete stop." The courtroom went very quiet. Judge Bennett looked up from his notes, suddenly interested. Officer Mitchell's confident expression faltered for just a moment. "You have dashcam footage?" the judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor. I maintain a dashcam in my vehicle for security purposes. The footage shows the complete sequence of events leading up to the traffic stop, including my full stop at the intersection." Mitchell spoke up. Your Honor, I'd like to question the authenticity of any video the defendant provides. Without proper chain of custody, let's see the video first, Judge Bennett interrupted. Then we can discuss authenticity if needed. Victoria connected her laptop to the courtroom's display system. She'd tested this setup the day before to make sure there wouldn't be any technical glitches. The large screen at the front of the courtroom came to life. This is continuous footage from my dashcam, Victoria explained as she started the video. You'll see the date and timestamp in the upper right corner, as well as GPS coordinates in the lower left. The video played. It showed Victoria's car driving down the street, approaching the intersection. Her brake lights illuminated. The car came to a complete and obvious stop. Victoria could even be seen looking left, then right, checking for traffic. The car remained stopped for a full 3 seconds. She'd counted longer than she'd remembered. Then she proceeded through the intersection. About 30 seconds later, the red and blue lights appeared behind her. The video continued through the entire traffic stop. Mitchell approaching her window. The conversation about the stop sign. His statement that his dashcam wasn't working. When the video ended, the courtroom was silent. Judge Bennett leaned forward. Officer Mitchell, that video clearly shows Ms. Chen coming to a complete stop. Mitchell's face had gone red. Your Honor, the lighting conditions that evening may have affected my perception. From my angle, your angle, Victoria interrupted, then immediately apologized. I'm sorry, Your Honor, may I speak? Go ahead, Ms. Chen. Your Honor, I'd like to point out that Officer Mitchell testified under oath that he had a clear, unobstructed view and that I failed to stop. The video evidence shows that's not true. This isn't a matter of perception or angle. I stopped. He said I didn't. Judge Bennett looked at Mitchell. Officer, did you make a mistake or did you deliberately issue a false citation? It was the question that mattered. A mistake was one thing. A deliberate lie was something else entirely. I may have been mistaken about this particular stop, Mitchell said, and Victoria could see him scrambling. The lighting, the angle perhaps, Your Honor, Victoria said. I'd also like to enter into evidence public record showing that Officer Mitchell has claimed dashcam malfunctions during 15 traffic stops in the past year. All 15 were contested citations. I find it statistically improbable that his equipment would fail exclusively during stops that are later disputed in court. Now Judge Bennett looked very interested. Is this true, Officer Mitchell? Equipment malfunctions happen, Mitchell said, but his earlier confidence had completely evaporated. The department has old cameras, 15 times in 1 year, the judge said. All during contested stops? Victoria pressed her advantage. Your Honor, I've also spoken with several citizens who were cited by Officer Mitchell during these so-called equipment malfunctions. They're here in the courtroom today. They all tell similar stories. They maintain they didn't commit the violations. But without video evidence, their word meant nothing against an officer's testimony. Patricia, Kevin, Walter, Daniel, and Jennifer all stood up in the back row. Judge Bennett looked at them, then back at Mitchell. Your Honor, Victoria continued, I believe this represents a pattern of misconduct that warrants investigation. Officer Mitchell has been issuing false citations, ensuring his dashcam isn't recording, and then winning in court because judges understandably tend to believe police officers over citizens. Mitchell found his voice again. This is ridiculous. Who is this woman to make such accusations? She's just trying to get out of a ticket by attacking my character. And that's when Victoria decided it was time. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out her credentials. She walked forward and handed them to Judge Bennett. Your Honor, my name is Victoria Chen. I'm the Assistant Special Agent in charge of the FBI field office in Harrison County. I supervise the Public Corruption Task Force. The courtroom exploded in whispers. Mitchell's face went from red to pale white. Judge Bennett examined her credentials carefully, then looked up at her with new eyes. Agent Chen, he said slowly, this is quite unusual. Yes, Your Honor. I didn't plan on identifying myself today. I wanted to handle this like any other citizen. But given Officer Mitchell's response and the pattern of behavior I've documented, I think it's important that the court understand that these allegations are not frivolous. She turned to look at Mitchell, who seemed frozen in place. I've been investigating you, Officer Mitchell. I've documented your pattern of false citations. I've interviewed your victims. I've analyzed your citation records and court testimonies. and I'm prepared to open a formal FBI investigation into civil rights violations and official misconduct." The courtroom was dead silent now. Everyone was staring at Mitchell, watching him realize that he hadn't just lied to some random citizen. He'd lied to a federal agent who investigated corruption for a living. Judge Bennett set down Victoria's credentials. "I'm dismissing the citation against Agent Chen. Officer Mitchell, you're going to remain in this courtroom. I'm calling a recess, and when we reconvene, I want you to be prepared to answer some very serious questions." The 15-minute recess felt like an eternity. Victoria stepped outside the courtroom into the hallway where Patricia, Kevin, Walter, Daniel, and Jennifer were waiting. They looked stunned. "You're FBI?" Patricia said, her voice filled with disbelief. "This whole time you were FBI?" 20 years, Victoria confirmed. "I work public corruption cases, police misconduct, civil rights violations, that kind of thing." Walter Phillips had tears in his eyes. "So this is really happening? Someone's finally going to hold him accountable?" "I'm going to do everything I can," Victoria promised. "What he did to you, to all of you, it's not just wrong. It's criminal." Jennifer Wu shook her head in wonder. "I knew something was off about that stop. I knew it, but I had no proof, no way to fight back. I felt so powerless." "But you're not powerless anymore," Victoria said. "None of you are." Kevin Thompson looked back toward the courtroom. "What happens now?" "Now the judge is going to question Mitchell, and depending on what happens in there, I'm going to open a federal investigation. But I need you all to know something. This might take time. Building a case that will hold up in court means doing everything by the book. It means documentation, interviews, evidence gathering. We'll do whatever you need," Daniel said, and the others nodded in agreement. Before Victoria could respond, her phone buzzed. It was Tony Reeves, her colleague from the FBI. "I just got a very interesting call from the Riverside Police Department," Tony said. "Their chief wants to know if it's true that one of their officers is under federal investigation." "Word travels fast, apparently." "The investigation hasn't officially opened yet," Victoria said. "But yes, it will be. Today's court appearance just gave us probable cause." "I pulled Mitchell's complete personnel file," Tony continued. "Victoria, this guy has been a problem for years. Multiple citizen complaints, all of them investigated internally and dismissed. 2 excessive force allegations, 1 accusation of false testimony in a DUI case. And get this, 3 other officers in his department have filed internal complaints about his conduct. None of them went anywhere." Victoria's jaw tightened. "So the department knew and did nothing. Looks that way. Which means this could be bigger than just one bad cop. Could be a systemic problem with how they handle internal complaints." "Send me everything you have," Victoria said. "I'm going back into the courtroom now. Call you after." When she returned to the courtroom, Officer Mitchell was sitting alone at the plaintiff's table. His earlier confidence had been completely replaced by barely contained panic. His hands were clasped tightly on the table, and he kept glancing toward the exit like he was considering making a run for it. The bailiff called everyone to order as Judge Bennett returned to the bench. The judge looked serious, almost grave. He'd spent the recess making some calls of his own, Victoria guessed. "This court is back in session," Judge Bennett announced. Officer Mitchell remained standing. Mitchell stood, his movements stiff. "I've spent the recess reviewing records," the judge continued, "and I've discovered some very troubling patterns. In the past 18 months, you've testified in this courtroom 53 times. In 47 of those cases, you testified that your dashcam footage was unavailable. That's an 88% failure rate." Mitchell opened his mouth to speak, but the judge held up a hand. "I'm not finished. I've also pulled the records of other officers who regularly testify in my courtroom. Their dashcam failure rates average between 2 and 5%. Yet somehow, your equipment fails almost every single time you have a contested citation." The courtroom was silent except for the humming of the fluorescent lights. "Even more concerning," Judge Bennett went on, "I've looked at the outcomes of your cases. You've never lost, not once. Every single time you've testified in my courtroom, I've ruled in your favor. And now I'm forced to wonder how many of those rulings were based on perjured testimony." Victoria watched Mitchell's face. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "Your Honor," Mitchell finally managed to say, "I've always testified truthfully to the best of my..."